Welcome to another Osceola video chat. Today we have Florida State Associate Athletic Director for Student Athlete Academic Services, Kacy King. Kacy, welcome and thank you for your time. I think maybe to start, let's have a little bit of an update on your background. I think you've been at Florida State since 2011. Tell us a little bit about what you've done for the university.
Yeah, so I've been here, this is concluding my 9th year, and started out in a role working with football mainly and overseeing our educational services. And as I've stuck around, I've continued to grow in our athletics department. And I'm also an assistant dean for undergraduate studies. So I enjoy that role as well. I just started that role in the summer of, good grief, what are we in, 2020? In the summer of 2019. So I like to think about student success from the university perspective, but obviously with our athletes in mind. My entire career had been focused on underprepared students. When I did my PhD, that's the area I studied at Michigan State, and thinking about, the idea of someone coming to college who we have told them they are a college student, and now we must provide them the support to prove that yes, they are a college student, even though maybe on the academic standards it doesn't look like that on paper. So I've always had an interest in helping underprepared learners and thinking about their experience at college and how we can make it the best possible.
It's good to hear. In talking with some of the coaches, both head coaches and assistants, we've heard pretty consistently that the folks on the academic side, have been working as hard as anyone. Can you maybe tell us what's a normal day like as far as communicating with athletes before COVID-19, and then some of the challenges that you guys are trying to find, solutions for now?
Yeah, and I'll say that, I have a fantastic staff, and they are the ones who are communicating with athletes the most frequently. Since I have moved up, I don't have as much of the one-on-one contact with students, which is a challenge just being in a role where you shift what that looks like. But I would say on a typical in the office kind of day, we are seeing students all day long. You might have a learning specialist who will have 2 students in their office and then 3 students at the computers outside their office, where they are managing multiple students working on different aspects of their schoolwork. And then an advisor who's got just sort of a steady stream of students coming in. And so we're used to seeing the students every single day, especially with football, who is in the building obviously much more frequently with more in the way that's set up. You might see a student who you never had on your schedule to see, but you've got a drive-by, as we call them, and they pop in and you're like, oh, I needed you today. Awesome. I'm so glad I can see you. Let's get this done, right? And so there's a lot of that sort of one-on-one that would happen in sort of an informal way as well. So obviously in this switch, we have to be so much more intentional. Every single thing that we are doing, we have to make sure we're reaching out to the student, we're making sure the coach is informed, we're making sure the learning specialist, the advisor, all the parts that we normally are making sure. But, in our office, Shanika's office is next to Regina's office. So when they both need to talk about a student, they're right next to each other and they talk about a student. But in this situation, it's much more intentional of, oh, hey, let's make sure we're using the group text, where if we have a student who maybe we have a little more attention paid to, we have a group text with the student, the learning specialist, the advisor, and the coach. Make sure we're all on the same page. We all know what's going on. And in my day-to-day, I'm going to a lot of meetings. I'm making sure that our staff is supported. I'm making sure our students are supported. So that for me is very similar, but it's been so much higher in volume of the number of meetings. Like today, I've probably had 7 meetings already since 8 o'clock this morning. And then we're also just trying to have more staff meetings so that we can have those contact points more frequently, and just having, just a check-in of, hey, how we doing? Because this is weird and we're used to having so much more contact, especially in our role. We're in a helping profession. You don't get into academics because you're like, oh, this is the glory. Academics is what everyone wants in athletics, right? We're the most exciting. In fact, no, I never want to be in the news, because if I'm in the news, it's probably not good, right? And so, so we're helpers. We want people to do well. So we're just trying to make sure students are still supported. And we, in one weekend, our tutor coordinator and the assistant tutor coordinator moved all tutoring online. And that, I mean, that's a massive undertaking to move everything into an online format and then figure out how we're going to make sure we're still following really great best practices in terms of NCAA legislation and academic integrity, and just making sure we're checking in on what those tutoring sessions look like. Because we have a rule, and it's an internal rule, that we don't have, tutors and students don't have contact information of each other. So how do we have them Zooming and still not have contact information? And so we set up through our SAS email account, that's where all of the tutoring sessions are originating from, so that we still don't have a student and a tutor exchanging personal information, so we can make sure we're following all of the information we got to follow.
So you kind of touched on it. It sounds like Zoom has been really helpful as far as communicating. Are there any other, texts, apps, technology, software that's kind of helped you guys just to maybe alleviate some of that stress that maybe a student athlete might have now?
We use a lot of technology. So we use Grades First, we use Teamworks, we use Teams, we use GroupMe. I mean, text, email. But one of our advisors said in the first week of the transition, he said, "Oh my gosh, with all the dings." He's like, "I've got my phone ringing, my text message, my GroupMe, my email. I got Zoom. I got like all the dings are happening." So I think that can become overwhelming even for staff, but I think we've been trying to really be mindful of it with students. Teamworks has been good in terms of mass communication and making sure people get what they need. We already used a product called Grades First. It's just how we schedule our tutoring and our different appointments. And so that sends the student an email reminder about their appointment. So it's a lot of, I will tell you, it's a lot of texting students individually too, or FaceTiming or whatnot.
I make a general statement that it seems like students in that, say, 18 to 23 age group, they're used to online learning. Some maybe might prefer to have that, one-on-one interaction with a professor after a class or something. Is there still the capability that you think enough where students are comfortable reaching out to you all, to a professor? Are they still able to kind of overcome some of those maybe tentative, I don't want to ask the question, but I really need to kind of moments? Are you seeing some comfort
Yeah,
there?
so we already did a lot from home at night with students. So I think that piece actually worked in our favor, because we're used to getting a text at 10 o'clock at night when somebody's working on something and they can't figure out where the link is, right? So we're used to troubleshooting that with a student very easily. And so the piece with the professor, that is a challenge. There are some students who are much more comfortable with walking up to a professor after class to talk to them, right? But I think our professors have done such a good job of trying to say, like, we're going through this too. So, reach out, or here's a whole bunch of communication I can provide to you, right? So I think that's fortunate. We were trying to work on some videos of like thanking tutors and things like that. And we had a couple of students who send in videos that are thanking professors. And I was like, use it. No, great. I'm thrilled that they felt like their professor really went above and beyond right now. Because, I teach. So I all of a sudden had to move my class online. And, a student emailed me today and said, "Oh, I can't figure out what this looks like." And I said, "Well, that's because that was in the reality where we were in person and I didn't catch that one. So let me fix it, because you're right, it's moved online. And so I have to reshape what that looks like for you." And the student was like, "Oh, good. I'm glad I wasn't confused on that." And it's little things like that where if we can encourage the student to reach out because something isn't making sense, it might not be making sense for the whole class. But I do think it's just a lot of information to manage. Even more so than normal. And I think that's true for any student at Florida State. I don't think that is specific to our athletes. I think it is just a lot of information that changed very, very quickly. The classes that were already online are the easiest ones to continue because they were already set up in that interface. It's the ones that had to transition that, the professors have done an excellent job of figuring out how does that transition, and we're all sort of working this out.
We're coming up 2 weeks away from the end of the spring semester, graduation for, I'm sure, a large number of student athletes, and I don't know the numbers. Maybe you can help with that. But does that make it more intense? Is there more of a sprint now, either on your end, the advisor's end, the student athlete's end?
I think if it were a typical semester, it would feel that way because it always does at the end of the semester. but actually it's sort of felt like this has been the longest, all those memes where it's like March had 375 days or, like those things. So I actually feel like this one has not felt as much of a crunch to the end, because all 5 weeks that have been online or will be online have felt like we've really got to get on top of this and we have to be very aware of what's going on. So I actually think that the mounting pressure was longer this time than normal. So I think it just shifted when that crunch time happens.
Coach Norvell at one point, I can't remember when or where, but he mentioned that academics was a part of a Monday morning meeting, a big point of emphasis where you talk about an academic all-star and who's doing well, who's not, who needs a little bit of help. Can you maybe just explain a little bit about how he's kind of been connected with what you all are doing?
Yeah, for sure. And he has absolutely taken academics on, and especially in this situation where academics is the thing that's happening, he's even been able to take it on more than I think any typical coach would in a spring term. And so he's been extremely supportive of the work we're doing, and we just know that if we haven't had the situation where we're having trouble getting in touch with a student, fortunately. I actually think the students have been way more accessible because they know that this is the situation we're in. But I know that immediately if we needed something, he or the position coaches obviously would be there to reach out. And he's got a real big push. He's been very supportive. He's been telling the students to finish strong. He really wants to see that GPA rise. And we have seen it rising in football. So we know that it's possible and we know it's coming. So we're very pleased with his support and his whole staff.
You've been in a couple of schools, and I think I haven't seen or heard of anything quite like what Leonard Hamilton has done with men's basketball. Essentially, if you're on campus for 4 years, you're going to get a degree. And even those guys who are leaving early are in a degree completion program.
Yep.
Have you seen anything quite like this in a sport like with men's basketball, where guys are typically making a jump, transferring around to another school to improve maybe their pro aspirations? What can you just say about what Leonard Hamilton has done here over the last 18 years or so?
I cannot say enough positive. I say all the time how thankful I am. I do not have men's basketball problems. They don't stress me out. I know they will get their work done, and I know they're going to do it in an ethical way, and I know coach has our back. And I don't know how many Power 5 academic directors can say that. And I am extremely thankful every day that I get to say that. I had been a little nervous with Coach Gates leaving because he had been our go-to person. I had developed a pretty good working relationship with him. So I always knew Coach Gates had us covered, right? Seamless. There has not been even a little bit of a downswing or, whatever the phrasing is, right? And I just think it's such a joy to work with men's basketball. They're great kids. I call them kids. I know they're adults. But Trent Forrest, I can't say enough about him. And, ACC post-grad, he already graduated. He's, academic All-American, just tremendous, right? And he's a great basketball player too. So it's not one or the other, right? It genuinely is part of what coach expects. And we're really thankful to be able to work with him. And he means it. He wants to bring a student here who's going to do well. And his students do go into the degree completion program. I have every expectation that Devin and Patrick will continue their degrees. Maybe not this summer because, well, first of all, we're in this bananas sort of world, right? But then also, I always say they're on a job interview. However long that is, they're on a job interview. And so we'll press pause until their job interview is over and they've landed their job, and then we can pick up that degree again.
It seems like every semester we do a story about somebody who's completing a degree. I know back in, I think it was August, it was Bobby Jackson.
Yep.
He was in his 60s. He was on Coach Bowden's first team. So no matter what your age is, you can either come back to campus or do it through online learning. How do you kind of emphasize that to those athletes who are leaving school early for whatever reason, whether it's pro or something else, and just say, hey, we're always there, whether it's sooner or later. What can we do to help you?
Oh, for sure. And I'm so proud of when they come back and finish. And it could be someone like Kenny Shaw, who wasn't gone for very long. And Rashad Green is hopefully going to finish and graduate this spring. And So, we definitely focus on that. And exactly how you just said, we always tell them, we're here for you. School is here. So just like I said before, especially for football, where your job interview is basically the entire spring, you know, go do your best in that job interview, have it, and, and land that spot on a team. That's a hard thing to do. There's so few spots, right? And so we want to be supportive of that athletic career. And your body is truly only good for as long as your body's going to be good for in the sport, right? But hopefully, and as I watch the game, I always want them to protect their brains, because you can come back and finish your degree later, right? Your brain and your ability to do school will be with you, but your body might not function in the sport for as long as you need it to. And so we completely respect that decision, and we're happy to work through those choices with a student. There are times where a student might make the decision to come back because he wants to graduate in the fall, and we'll work out what that looks like. And sometimes it's a really challenging summer before their last fall to make sure that they can then graduate that fall. But we like to be a part of that process and think about how we can do that. And especially in a sport like football, we try to have fall graduation to line up with when the season ends. Whereas in basketball, it's a little bit easier, where we can have that spring graduation because the season's ending in that spring.